This is the day I waited for so long to announce. And maybe if you even watched the video I posted yesterday, Treezilla is toothpicks. He sleeps with the fishes. Every time I see a chopstick, I'll wonder if that's part of Treezilla. I am so happy, you cannot imagine. Our garage for the last 10 years, this tree, every time we had a storm, this tree, and it was coming down in pieces, branches were falling. It actually did some damage on the side of my garage already. All that's toast now. He's toothpicks. So now I can move forward with the restoration, not with this in the back of my mind. And this is going to be a very, very eclectic day. I've got a lot of little things to do, but ultimately somewhere very soon I've got to rearrange the whole garage so that right where I'm standing right now, I can totally disassemble the bike that we're working on. And I need to pull the wheels off, the forks, the shock, so it's going to be just hanging from a dental floss or something, I don't know. But I'm not going to do that today. I have some other things I want to do in the shop. It's going to be a very eclectic day. Now, all through any restoration, there are always little watersheds, little things you can mark as well. Now I'm at the end of that chapter and I can move on. Now, in the case of our 650, I've been trying to do it in predictable bites and chunks and apply the lessons I learned from previous restorations. Now for me, it's always easier to leapfrog my way through a restoration than come out to the garage and in one day pull a whole bike apart and just hang the engine and frame by a come-along. It's easier to do it the way I'm doing it now. The last couple I've done that way, and it's worked pretty well for me, but it's done something that I can't really describe on a video. It's made it more fun to do it. It's made it more enjoyable. I don't feel like I'm working. I feel like I'm taking a little bite of provolone cheese every day instead of stuffing a whole cheese in my mouth. So speaking of provolone cheese, Luciano called me. They were chopping Treezilla down and I was eating provolone cheese. That's why I reminds me. From Uncle Giuseppe's. But here's what happened. He bought a new bike. And I won't let the cat out of the bag. It's a very cool bike. It's a 200cc, something unusual that'll be nice to add to his collection. I look forward to taking a little test ride on it. As soon as he gets it, it should be delivered in the next week. It's coming from California, and it's a unique bike that I've never seen before. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but what I am going to do is go up there, and I'll get it on video, and I'll try to do my honest evaluation of if I like it, don't like it. But from the pictures he sent me and the videos, it looks like it's pretty cool. And possibly for some of our friends or the newer riders that are not looking to spend $15,000, $20,000 on a super bike, this might be a good choice. Or if you're not, here's another thing. If you're looking to spend about $2,300 and not do any restoration, have a new bike right away. See, that wouldn't appeal to me that much, but I do understand. Not everybody enjoys the beauty, I think it is, of restoring these old motorcycles. So let me get out and get this day started. So this is what's left of Treezilla as we start the day here. Treezilla, he will not have won the battle. And look at the sawdust around here. I just look, wow. This was a giant bullet to duck. This will actually make my morning pond clean out a little bit easier too, because Treezilla was dropping stuff in a pond virtually every day. Now I always check the weather, and I check my painting bench, because it looks like it will be appropriate to paint today if we have anything to paint as the day plays out. But of course the first part of the day is to check with my boss and get the schedule of the day. I mentioned my pet Baltimore Oriole chickie the other day, and this is where he's buried right here. This is his little monument. And boy, did we have fun with him over 7 years. He lived 7 years average for a Baltimore Oriole. And one thing that's funny, my yard looks twice as big now with Treezilla gone. Well, Treezilla gone, but not forgotten. So let's get this day started on the right note. So the first thing here after my coffee is to decide which ones of these parts I want to work on. And these have been drying up by a heating vent. Some of the parts have been right underneath it. The heat's been on like crazy because it's been very cold. as I look at this from far away, it looks like that. Look, I can see my face in there. Wow, handsome guy. Wow, Sean Connery stand-in. I'm not so sure. Anyway, I'm going to check out how dry this paint is, do a little test on my smaller parts. If it's ready to buff, fine. These parts, I'm not sure if they're going to need any more clear, but Karen just yelled down to me, it just started to snow. And there's no prediction of snow in the weather today. So we may have to punt the football here. I'm not sure. But that's what's true in my life. Every day is an adventure. So because of the weather, we've decided to turn this into a buffing, polishing, sanding day, not a spray painting day. But I'm not sure that's not going to work to our advantage. So we're going to start with Indasa 2000 Grit. Now, some of the information I'd like to share with this video is basic 101 painting information. Over the last 50 years, we've painted lacquer, acrylic lacquer, every kind of Imron and Duke-Part and everything you could. But they all have one thing in common. All paint has one thing in common, even Rust-Oleum. It's got to be totally dry before you can buff it or sand it. Now, the way to tell, so you always want to know how to do that little test. It's not that difficult to do. 2000 grit paper, a little bit of soapy water with Dawn in it. If you have a flat spot like this, you can use a sanding block. I want to do one little part in real time, but this is kind of 101 finishing. Once you can get this part flat, because if we were spraying in a spray booth under controlled conditions with heat lamps and air conditioning, dehumidifiers, and a NASCAR garage floor, well, it would be a lot better than what we have. There'd be a lot less little dust in the paint and little imperfections. But guess what? It still wouldn't be a buffed out finish. There is no such thing as you can paint from a gun and not buff it out, and you're going to have the exact same shine that I'm going to have. Even under controlled conditions, you might get close, but a real experienced painter can always tell paint that's been buffed. Paint that has that look. I don't know what it is, the depth, the look. Some people can't tell too. You know, I can't tell the difference between good spaghetti and bad spaghetti, but Karen can. That's the point. So I'm looking at, and I want to do one little spot in real time, and that's once the part is like this, you're ready to make the decision. Does it have enough clear on it? If it has enough clear, we're ready to buff it. So let me do the rest of this offhand. The rest of this I can do by hand. When the whole part is like that, we make the decision, is it dry enough to buff? Now, the test is, you look at the sandpaper, and I want to show this. This is probably something, just get rid of all the bubbles. If I were to see chewing gum up on the sandpaper, I call it chewing gum. It's just little balls of paint. Well, I know, guess what? The paint's not dry. Another trick, you can turn the sandpaper this way, sand for a while, turn it this way, sand for a while, turn it this way. That gives you 4 sanding surfaces. Then you can take a scissor and cut the edge off, make a picture frame off, and now you have 4 brand new edges. So in essence, with one piece of sandpaper, you can do an awful lot of sanding, and that is a really wonderful, good, economical trick. Or you can just buy 1,000 sheets of sandpaper and waste it. Now a couple of other tips. I'm sanding this part by hand. I want to avoid that mountaintop, because where that comes to a peak, if I start sanding it, I'm going to go right through. Also paint, all paint, doesn't matter what kind it is, it'll always form a little bit of an extra lip along the edge. If you want to really be careful, you can sand that until that little ridge goes away. Or if it doesn't bother you to have that ridge, some people it doesn't bother at all. On the real high quality finishers that I've seen, some people don't even bother to sand that ridge. But I try to get as much of it flat. I can see right here as an example. Let me show this right here. If you look right there, you see that little error? I can hand sand that, not block sand it. I'll hand sand that. Over in the corner here. The whole objective is, if you understand the objective, is to have the whole part that it's flat before you buff it. Now, and I'm addressing this to Scott. Scott asked me about primer the other day and how many coats and how many. Well, all the primer ever does is hold the paint. It's a bonding agent. It acts like the salami in a salami sandwich. It holds the paint to the part. A little bit better than what this does. Now, some people filler primer fills it in. We don't have any filling on this. So the minimum primer, and then I would say this, minimum black. The idea being, I don't want the final finish to be any thicker than it is. Thick paint tends to be a problem and crack. Thin paint doesn't. So here's the ultimate thing. If I were to take this part, sand it, and put 100 coats of clear on, what would happen is I'd lose all my fits and finishes, but it wouldn't be any shinier. The trick is to always know how much paint has to go on to make it perfectly flat and level, and once it's flat and level, buff it. And not have 10 extra coats of clear on. There's no advantage, unless you're burying something in clear around stickers or lettering, there's no advantage to having 20, 30 extra coats of clear, especially on parts that you're going to have exposed to the sun and going to be exposed to vibration. That's even more of a problem. So just good general information you can put in the bank. Okay, now once that part is totally flat, we're ready to see if the paint is ready to buff. And a material that we're going to use for buffing, 4CR 8065. Sometimes it can be hard to find. I get it at the local body shop supplier here, Gavin's, but it is made in Germany. So there's a couple of rules of engagement that I say from many years of doing this. If you're going to do this and be real serious about it, these old pads, yes, you can wash them, yes, you can use them over, but they're never going to be exactly as good as a brand new one. And since these are relatively inexpensive, and one of the things that, oops, look at that. That's exciting. One of the reasons I'm drawn to painting things, and I've always liked to improve my skills and learn more and everything, because with paint, I can do something very inexpensively to do a restoration. I can turn a rusty old hulk of anything into something really nice for almost no money. Basically, very inexpensively. Paint, relative to just about anything else that you use for restoration, relatively cheap. Now, I'm getting to the end of this one. Luckily, I just bought another new one. But I've gotten such good use out of this that it's just unbelievable how good this is. Now, I have used the Meguiar's. That's real good too. I have used several other ones. Glenn had one, and to be honest, I don't remember the name of it, but he had a system they used. He brought it here. We did some of his motorcycle fairings and stuff. We shared it on video. But again, the whole thing to remember here, the thing you want to do with the first test before you do anything, this paint is about 3 days old. Let's see if it's ready to buff. And the only way you're going to know is one simple way. You got to buff something. You've got to do one little spot, give it 2 or 3 minutes. I like to do the first one in real time. That's just the way it is. And I know there's new people to the channel, and I'm not crazy about going back to the old videos, but you can search the channel for, if you key the search word in buffing, I think 300 or 400 videos come up. So, and they're all basically similar, not exactly the same, but similar, because the technology works all the time. Now, for somebody, and again, I'm using Scott as an example, that has never done this, or maybe done it a very few times, the rules of engagement don't change. That's the one thing good about painting. What worked 20 years ago is going to work right now. It doesn't change from week to week to week. It gets a little bit easier. Let me get a rig. It gets a little bit easier with modern paints, or a little bit easier than old lacquers and acrylic lacquers and enamels and things, but it's still the basic rules of engagement. The paint has to be dry, it has to be flat, and then you buff until you cannot see a scratch. Now let me see if I can get this up close, because when I do one in real time, a lot of people fall asleep, but the bottom line is, and what we're trying to do with the videos, is pass on some good information. And that's probably Luciano telling me he's at Uncle Giuseppe's. Now, on small parts that are oddly shaped, sometimes it's difficult to get around all the corners and edges. And in the end, you always have some little part you have to do by hand. But the reason I'm saying this is the big heavy-duty buffer like you would use on a car, it kind of taxes your arm. And if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, I guess it's great. Unfortunately, I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger. So what happens is the little Harbor Freight palm sander just seems to be so much easier to handle, and it goes, I'd say 90% as quick as the big giant buffer that you feel like you're holding a watermelon in your hand. And you can use it with one hand. That makes it very convenient, because in our case we always have to hold the part. Now there's always a few areas, and in this case I'm being real fussy. Now the reason I'm being real fussy is once I put the motorcycle together, doing anything like this gets real difficult. Now I know some people, when you're buffing out a car, nobody has to hold the car. You have two hands for the buffer. When you're doing motorcycle parts, you only really have one hand most of the time, unless you have a pet octopus or something, or train your wife to hold the parts. In my case, I'm not even holding my breath here. So the whole part is that if you see the whole technique once, you practice on something, when it comes time to do something that you really have a passion for, it should be relatively easy. Because everything I've done here, there's not one part of this that's kind of like a secret, oh, well, you know, no, don't tell anybody that. And that was prevalent in many things I've been involved with, that people didn't want to part with the secrets. I think thanks in big part to YouTube that, well, all I can speculate is the world is better now because of people sharing things, that's for sure. Now that whole part, that's ready. I'll take this piece off. That's ready in my book to add to the parts that are ready to put back on a motorcycle. Then usually once I break the stick off, I can just take a razor blade and cut the glue off, but that hot glue is just really good for doing that kind of a job. And because of that handle, let me get this out of here. Because of that handle, it allows us to handle a part during painting. Because how would you hold this? You know, you always have to take into account, you have to have a way to hold things, just like in a machine shop. Now it's always good, anytime we put one other part back on the table, ready to put back on the motorcycle. I always think anytime you add a part, it's time to celebrate with another cup of coffee. Yes, but you don't need an excuse. Anyway, that really did come out nice. Now the other one will be exactly the same, and you can see the little painting flaws, the little things that fall into the paint and whatever. And when you have to paint outside, especially during this time of year, that's typical, but I'm just going to repeat all the steps I did on the first part, and an hour from now, that'll be ready to add to our parts ready to put back on the motorcycle. Now, as I'm getting ready to buff the second part, these two matching parts, I just wanted to mention something that's always important. Whenever I do two parts the same, the second part seems to go just a little bit faster. And as I've said before, it's always nice to add those pieces that are they're ready to put back on a motorcycle. And every time we add one to that collection, we're one step closer to having the whole project done. But we're in no rush. That's one of the key things to quality work. Because I want to see exactly what part of this we're going to see. See, this part actually goes, it has some snaps and some Zeus fasteners and things. So I know we're going to see this whole area, we're going to see this whole area here, and of course the front. So this part, for sure, I'm going to probably have to do most of this by hand to flatten this out and to get it ready for buffing. And I'm going to have to probably do this whole nose piece by hand, but this is really a delicate piece. But anyway, it's not going to get done unless I start it. I found that out the hard way, by the way. Turns out there's an awful lot of this part that I want to get perfectly flat, and here's what the hard block is good for. Since we're going to see this whole inside, I'm probably going to have to do a lot of this buffing by hand, but getting this part as much as I can with the hard block with the point on the end, this will just make it a little bit easier. Yeah, you never know how easy it's going to be. Sometimes you look at a spot and you think, oh, that'll be no problem, we'll just XYZ, and then when you go to do it, you realize, holy mackerel, I got to do the whole thing by hand. This may be a part that's going to take an awful lot of time. But again, I don't try to do this, I don't try to do anything in the shop as if time mattered, because if it mattered, just don't do it. Just go buy a brand new bike and you're done with it. But
then it's a different sport, a different hobby, whatever you want to call it. But when you want to restore these old, I don't know what you call them, rust buckets. 11-year-old bike. Yeah, you think an 11-year-old bike that's been kept in a garage, it doesn't have any rusty issues or any paint chips, or not really. But when we're done with this, I should have the equivalent of having a new, I'll feel like it's a new bike for my collection. So, and that's the bottom line of everything. And I really am looking forward to seeing Luciano's new bike. I'm kind of excited about that. So we will get it on video one way or another when we're able to get up there. And if the weather was appropriate, even get a test ride. So this whole thing, because it's all angles and edges, is going to be a lot of hand sanding. Maybe a lot longer than I thought it originally would be. Now, in the course of doing all of the hand sanding here, there's a couple of spots I'm not real happy with. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to finish all the sanding on this part and see if I can sneak outside and get some paint on this. I don't know if I can, because Karen said it stopped snowing a couple hours ago. And the sun came out and everything's melted up and it's a beautiful sunny day. So I'm not sure. But if I can, I still got a little bit of time left here today. It would be nice to get this another coat of paint on it. But there are some spots on this that one of them was right on the corner here where I broke through the corner. And obviously I don't want to have that in the final part. And a couple of spots where just the paint wasn't level like I wanted it to be. And there's no substitute for just put another coat of paint on. I can shoot this with black, and actually, depending on the weather, maybe even get the clear on today. We'll see. We're building up some air in a compressor here, and I think we're going to be able to paint. We'll see how it is when we get outside. Now, just talk about an unpredictable day. How could you even plan this? It was snowing this morning. It was below freezing. It's over 40 now as I tack rag this part down. And it's not uncommon on a part this complex to go through on an edge or a corner, or we can see where let's see, right up here in a spot I went through, but there's always a recovery. And the recovery is easy. You just put some more black and another coat of clear, or 2 coats of clear. But there's always a recovery. When you drop the football, there's always a recovery. And that's the purpose of these videos, is to show some of that. And we're up by the heating vent. That's going to dry for about 20 minutes. I'll have myself a little coffee break. And I think it's great out there. We'll be able to shoot some clear. Free bonus today. But this shows a real touch-up of a part that had some sand throughs. And in half an hour from now, it'll be like it never happened. So the clear we're going to use to re-clear coat the part. And this does show a really good recovery from a sand through. Something I didn't expect, but we'll use it to our advantage. GAVCO Clear, pretty much the same as the 5-star. Well, this ends yet another unpredictable day. This is an absolutely, I had no idea this morning it was snowing. This afternoon it's sunny, we could go out water skiing. I don't know. I wound up getting 2 more coats of clear on this. And I think showing a touch-up where you've sanded through is a good thing, because basically we all sand through. If somebody tells you they don't, they're lying. Probably lying. Definitely lying.
Anyway, Treezilla is chopsticks. I am so happy about that. I'm so happy the way this paint job's coming up. And we got a couple more parts to buff out, clean up. But the main thing is then I've got to reorganize the garage for taking the big parts off the motorcycle, the wheels and whatnot. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video and thanks for watching.